Hey TV fans, and Happy New Year. This is going to be my review of the Tourist Season 2, Episode 1. So full spoilers from the start of this review. I did review Season 1 on the channel, so you can go back and catch up on those reviews if you haven't checked them out and you're a fan of the show. So, the setup for this season is that Elliot and Helen are now a couple, and they're travelling around together. She shows him a letter, which she got when they were back in Australia, from someone from his past back in Ireland, and it inspires them to travel to his hometown in Ireland. And they're meant to be meeting someone claiming to be a cousin of Elliot. And it's at this point where he randomly goes and shaves his beard in the toilet, and he's kidnapped by a bunch of hooded figures. And there's a lot of antics, really, but we get a whole process of them torturing him and a lot of back and forth, but these are people who clearly have an agenda against him from the past, and that once again is going to be a big thing in this season, him trying to figure out things from his past, and more secrets coming out now that they're in the hometown. And we also meet his mother in this episode, who hasn't seen him for years. And it's hard to tell from the episode whether she's someone who's going to be a sympathetic character or a villain. She does violently kill someone at some point, so that might point more to a villain, but the person she kills in such brutal fashion isn't probably the most sympathetic of characters. But that's something when Helen goes to the local police and she meets Elliot's mother and starts asking her questions about the past. We find out that Elliot apparently had a career as a dancer, or was quite the dancer when he was young, and that gives Helen a little bit of a chuckle. But she's a little suspicious of the mother, like maybe thinks that the mother knows a bit more than she's letting on. So we do see Helen following the mother around, and it builds that scene where the mother goes to like a gangland leader who she thinks might have Elliot, or knows who's got Elliot, and we see another side of the mother. So this was a lot of fun, this episode. It hit the ground running pretty much. One thing which was there from the start was the chemistry between Helen and Elliot. Like, the actors have really good chemistry. I like both actors. And they make for a fun couple. And it sort of reminds you, or reminded me, why I wanted them to get together last season. So that's definitely in the show's plus column, because you do care about those characters and their relationship. And I think Danielle McDonald's a great actress, so I know this is the sort of show where it's a very pulpy, like twisty and turny, like black comedy thriller. So you don't necessarily always get the most serious drama, and there's bits of it that are more sort of wacky and off-kilter and a little bit more on the silly side, in a good way for the most part, I think. But like, there are moments in this episode that are quite moving, and moments that you do feel for the characters, and where Danielle McDonald does a great job of selling, how cut up she is about Elliot being taken away from her, how worried she is. You get some great little bits of quiet acting from her. And once again, Jamie Dornan is doing a great job as Elliot. Like, he is really well cast as this quite brooding but quite bemused sort of figure who doesn't because he doesn't really have recollection of the past. He has no idea what is happening to him, and some of his deadpan kind of sarky reactions to these people who have kidnapped him are really funny, really defiant. And another thing I'll say is, because one of the things with season 1 was then Helen's husband, Nathan, who she's now separated from in this season. I don't know if that's official, but she's clearly left him for Elliot. But like, he was quite annoying in season 1, and I don't remember it always being in a good way. So I think that's something which has already improved this season, because in season 1, I think because they were definitely planting the seeds for like Helen and Elliot to get together, and also because you had this thing where she was trying to do her job and trying to investigate the case and find out what exactly is going on, and he was constantly being passive aggressive and always trying to say, you don't spend enough time with me, you're too focused on the case, your job, that kind of thing. I think it got a bit more annoying in season 1 than it was meant to be, and it's almost like it was just a storyline thing just to create a little bit of attention and a little bit of a hurdle for her to get over at the end of the season. And when she did it and finally stood up to him, it was a good moment, but it was more of a frustrating part of the season. But straight away from this opening episode of season 2, with them now being separated, but him contacting Helen, so far it's a lot more entertaining, because you have this whole thing with him where he calls her out of the blue when she's in Ireland, when she's in like the police station, and she rushes to her phone believing it's going to be Elliot or someone connected to like him, someone who's taken him, someone important anyway, and it just turns out to be Nathan, and he's making a big thing about, I think he calls it a Ned Talk, so it's like it's a less publicised version of a TED Talk, and he's given it to this group, and Helen realised then he's in the group now, so she's like on speakerphone, and she hangs up on him, and it's really embarrassing. But just his whole thing in this is really funny, like, because I really loved the scene in the bowling alley where he's just talking to this guy and he's ranting about Helen and how he's going to go to Ireland and try and win it back, and he does this really cringe line about like getting a strike or something, but how he makes it about Helen, and part of the gag is that he keeps missing completely like the bowling skills, like that they just keep going down the side bits. But the payoff to the joke, which is really funny, is that he doesn't even know the guy. It's just a guy who's waiting for his mates to come along, and he's like, okay, my mates are here, and he's like, no problem. And he just keeps bowling. But that's just such a funny gag, because they set you up to think this is a guy that he at least knows. And later on, we see he gets on a plane to Ireland, and they're setting something up with him, and there's this woman who sits next to him on the plane, and it's at a point where the kidnappers have lost Elliot, like he's managed to escape, and that's quite good fun stuff as well. But this woman just happens to be the woman who's on the other end of the telephone to like one of the kidnappers, so that's one of those like coincidences that's a bit much, but they're gonna do something with that, I think, with that her and Ethan on the same plane, Ethan's probably going to start to twig that there's some sort of connection or something like that. But she has quite a funny reaction to him because he introduces himself, and she's like, "Oh, hey, Ethan, I don't give a shit," and like I think she puts on her headphones or something. But so I think definitely they're using Ethan better so far this season. Like I do find his stuff in this episode really entertaining. But we definitely get some vintage sort of like tourist like antics and that typical off-kilter type stuff, and just some really fun lines of dialogue and some subversive stuff going on, because when Elliot's like kidnapped, he's in the back of the van and he's doing everything he can to like escape out the back doors, and the kidnappers have just got on like it's one of the famous Pretender song, and he's got his hand out the window like sort of moving along, and it's one of them in particular. He's kind of just bopping his head along to this song, and it's just this funny little contrast to Elliot doing everything he can in the back of the van to escape. And then you get a fun chase action type scene with some comedic moment as they're chasing him up the hill in the van, and there's lots of back and forth. And there's some good stuff when he's actually kidnapped and in this place, because there's a nice little mystery element to this where there's a gross moment where there's like a dead pig and Elliot's in this room and he can't get out, and it's like open me or dig in or something like that on the pig, and there's a key in there, and this is where you get like a bit of a puzzle box type feel to the episode. But what's absolutely priceless is then you get a really funny parody of the Saw movies because one of the kidnappers are talking to him over like the intercom, but in like a Jigsaw style voice box where he's like doing a similar sort of voice and he's talking all cryptic. But the bit that then was absolutely priceless was when he tells Elliot to like saw his legs off, like he's left a saw in the room with him, and he's like, well, what if I don't want to saw my legs off just because you tell me? And that stuff is so funny because it's clearly they're clearly parodying the Saw movie, so that's absolutely brilliant. And it turns out one of the kidnappers, it's just him messing with Elliot, and then you get back and forth throughout the episode with them kind of torturing him a little bit, and it turns out they're like a family, but so there could be some connection to like this kind of cartel style thing than the mother goes to at one point, or someone who seems to have a connection. But it seems like there's something from Elliot's past tied into this, and they sort of lured him in by pretending it was like they were his cousin. And you also have this character of this detective who's sent to investigate the case. And I seem to remember there was a similar character in the first season, but in Australia, who was basically a real sort of wet blanket, like overly emotional and just a bit clueless. And I think what I like about this stuff is it gives Helen a good chance to be proactive and to actually show them she's the real sort of like detective, if you like. She's the one with the instincts, and it's a little different this time because she's now with Elliot, and she cares about him a lot more than she did when the thing started. So, but instantly when this guy shows up and he's there's a little bit of humour back and forth because he's like stating the obvious because she tells him what went down and he's like, well, that probably wasn't his cousin. It was probably a trap. And she's like, yes, I know that. But instantly she's showing this guy, well, this is what happened. This is the scene. And like they go out the back way and start looking for clues and stuff. But instantly she's playing like the cop version, and this guy is just a real kind of loser and like wet blanket. But the first time we see him, like he's getting really emotional in the toilet, and we see that he's having, well, marriage problems, but I'm going to get to what exactly it is because he's wrestling with whether to like wash his wedding ring down the toilet, flush it down the toilet, that's the word I'm looking for. But anyway, yeah, like his side of the plot gets really weird at the end of the episode because we see that his mother is aging and must have some sort of dementia or some sort of disease where she's not very responsive. She just sits in front of the TV. And that's actually a little bit more of a tender moment in the episode. But then it turns out there's a twist where he goes downstairs. And it's really weird, like the way he shuts off, makes sure that there's no way into like the other bit, because it's almost like he's got another life downstairs, and we see him go down and put some beans on the stove, and he's talking to someone, and at first we don't see who it is, but it's revealed later on he's got a wife, or at least he thinks it's a wife, and this guy clearly has a lot of issues because it's actually a mannequin. And she falls over, it falls over, and he's like reacting like it's a real person, like his wife had died. So we're starting to get more into this character, and I mean that was an interesting twist. Like I'm not sure what purpose it serves, and I'm not sure if I'm as into this character as everybody else. He was a little bit more, I don't know, like for whatever reason he didn't really grab me as much as some of the other characters have, and I don't know if we necessarily need a subplot with him, but there you go. Anyway, that was something. That was something a little bit weird. Then they went in that direction. So, I mean, that's pretty much the episode. As I said, Elliot's mother goes to this like gang leader, and I thought she was going to shoot him. And she ends it by sending a message to the others in the gang, Keitel, whatever you want to say, but it's a proper horror moment because she stabs him in the eye, and Helen has followed her, so she like sees this. So definitely there's something going on with this woman more than meets the eye, which is a good thing. And Elliot thinks he's escaped because he befriends one of them. Not exactly befriends, but like one of the kidnappers he's a little bit more softer than the other two, so he persuades him to like let him have a drink, and he works out quite an intricate plan to escape, and he like sets a fire so that in the commotion he can like escape, but the villains are pretty confident he can't really go anywhere, and that's where the episode ends pretty much, because he's on a cliff and he realises there's no real place to go to escape. But there's also like, I'm assuming it's meant to be like a flashback when, I think it's in the past, someone, I don't know if it's in the past or if it's just that they're claiming that they killed Elliot just so that they can get some money or whatever the deal is, because she goes to the bottom of the sea and comes back up with something, but then she claims that Elliot has been killed, and that's kind of how we end the episode. So, yeah, pretty intriguing stuff, but it was a fun episode back. I'm enjoying it, season 2 so far quite a lot. Maybe we'll get some of the kinks of season 1 out the way and straighten out, because season 1 was mostly fun, but there were some kinks which held it back at times. But yeah, fun start to season 2, so I'll be back soon with a review of episode 2. Let me know your thoughts if you've watched this one in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.